and I run Sew Ab Fab. However, I'm also one half of the Sew Ab Fab podcast. In the Sew Ab Fab podcast, we introduce you to guests that are integral to home sewing. Our guests all have small to medium sized sewing related businesses or provide necessary resources to help you as sewers. So today's guest is a very important person. She is the other half of the Sew Ab Fab podcast and the owner of Bobbin Sewing School. So welcome, Ali.
Hello, Caroline. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
I'm okay. So it's via Zoom. We're talking to one another, obviously for distance reasons, but because we're in the COVID lockdown as well.
Exactly. So we see each other regularly by Zoom, but we haven't seen each other now for probably about 9 months.
Yeah, more. Yes. Yeah, well, actually, yes, it was when I brought your chickens to you.
Yeah. So, Ali, before I start with lots of questions, maybe you'd like to give a little introduction into Bobbin Sewing School.
Yes, Caroline, I will. So Bobbin Sewing School is a little sewing school set in mid-Hampshire. We are positioned in the town of Stockbridge, which is in a very quaint area. It sits on the River Test, and beside my little workshop here, I have a little tiny tributary of the River Test, a little stream running beside. So I have a little babbling brook just beside me, which is rather sweet, and ducks look through the windows and the egret too, which is one of the wonderful and welcoming parts of my sewing school. It means that when visitors come to do classes, they're taken in with the surroundings as well. So it's a lovely, relaxing and I'd say productive educational spot to come to.
It is beautiful. It is a breathtaking spot.
Oh, thank you.
That's okay. I know you started to sew from a very young age. Who in your family encouraged you and inspired you to sew?
So I started to sew from a very young age. I was always sort of playing with little bits of fabric and snippets of fabric for my dollies when I was a little girl. But my grandmother was a dressmaker. She was a very, very talented seamstress. She'd started sewing as a young girl herself, and she actually trained to be a dressmaker, and that was her main job. And then as I grew, I sort of went, into the horses and the ponies, and then came back to it in mid-teens through the Young Farmers Club, which is a very strange way of turning your career or starting your career. But they held competitions every year, and fashion was one of them. And my father, he encouraged me to have a go, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure your gran will help you with making something." And so she did. And from there, I just grew a passion for sewing, and did very well through it, and eventually studied it. And here we are today, sort of 40 odd years later.
So what was your course at college?
So my course at college was garment construction, design and technology. I mean, when I say garment construction, it was garment construction from the grassroots through to the design. So you design, pattern cut, and produce manufacturers type documents to tell how you would create these garments. So it was very thorough. The technology side, I would say, because that was back in the late 1980s, sort of 88. And so technology wasn't what it is today. So we didn't have CAD design. We didn't have the computer aided technology that we have now. However, the technology was there and we were beginning to work with it. So yes, so it was a very full on course that led you into whatever area of fashion you wanted, whether that be media, design, pattern cutting, dressmaking, manufacture. So so we're a very thorough course.
Wow. So I often hear you talking about your time working for a boutique. Can you explain what you did there? Was it your first job after leaving college?
Yeah, it wasn't my first job. Well, it was my first job, but it wasn't my first job in fashion. I actually started off at the clothing workshop in Oxford, which was a couture dressmakers in Oxford. And I started there through my school work experience. So I turned up for my work experience and was offered a Saturday job and a holiday job. And then that took me through college. And when I left college, I actually went into retail. So I worked in a boutique in Oxfordshire and had a lovely time. I was very, very fortunate. I worked with a wonderful woman called Ruby Carlin, who had such skill. She had been a milliner, she had been a couture dressmaker, but sort of fell into retail and managed a very lovely shop. And we did lots of in-house alterations. And I would say that the in-house alterations was one of the biggest learning areas for me. It was one of the things that I think has given me great insight into garment construction. Even though I'd studied it, it gave me a different insight to garment construction. And I was very lucky there. I got involved in all sorts of areas of the business. So whether it was, stocking in, stocking out, whether it was buying, which we did, I enjoyed my time buying, used to go to the very fashionable areas of London, Bond Street, etc., to go and sit and watch the fashion shows and make the buys for our clients. We used to have a little book that we'd know what our clients would like, so we bought those, but we bought other regular things as well, and then up to Birmingham and up to the big shows. And we also had some smaller independent businesses that would come and they bring their collections to us, and we would buy in the shop as well for stock. It was great. I really loved it. It was a great time and something that I look back fondly with. Yes.
That's good. I know now that your boys are grown up, but did your sewing work fit around raising a young family?
Yes, it did. So I carried on working when I had my first son. I reduced my hours, but then we actually moved house and I actually gave up work for a while. Having said that, and then had my second son, but having said that, I was always dabbling with sewing. So I always had something on the go. So I also had a little sort of number of clients that I worked for. So whether that would be making things for them as commissions or whether it was alterations, I had those. And I also made a little collection of children's clothes myself, which I took to craft fairs, which was just something that just fitted in round my children. And at the same time, I was helping my husband with the farm. So I was calf rearing and getting involved with the animals and moving electric fences regularly and things like that, which, as being married to a farmer, that's what you do. You drop everything at the drop of a hat when they say, can you come and do this? So it worked for me. It was something that I could work at home. I could fit around my children, fit around the animals and life in general. So it worked really well.
And at what point did you decide to start teaching?
So I think that sort of developed over time. I think I'd started teaching people because they kept asking me, because they knew that I sewed and they knew that that's what I did. And so I'd have people saying to me, oh, could you teach me to sew? So, I'd have a couple of people come along and I'd teach them to sew just as sort of like a social thing, really. And then that developed and I realized that I really enjoyed teaching sewing. So it grew from one person to two, and then eventually I decided that I'd set up some formal classes and took it from there, really.
And did you initially start teaching with the formation of Bobbin Sewing School?
No, I didn't, Caroline. Actually, I set up as a bankroll project for another project that I had in mind, a sewing school called Pin and Stitch. And this was back in sort of 2010, 2011, when we had the movement for, austerity. And what happened was I started that sewing school and I did a few classes. I did them locally and at my home. And then I was approached by two ladies in Winchester who'd set up Bobbin Sewing School. That was in 2012. And they'd set up Bobbin Sewing School and were looking for tutors. So through a mutual friend, I was approached and I went and taught for them. And then gradually over time, both it was Alison Lee and Wendy Wyatt, their lives took over, and Alison wanted to go back to her art and her studio that she'd used for Bobbin. She wanted to return that to an art studio. And so Bobbin moved, and Wendy and I went on and taught elsewhere. We used the library, and we used village halls and church halls. And then in 2014, Wendy, her husband's business was expanding mad. Wendy was very involved in that, so she had to devote her time to that. And at that point, she said, "Do you want to carry on?" And so I took over Bobbin Sewing School. So that's how I came to start teaching with Bobbin Sewing School.
Gosh, 9 years. So you must have had to make changes to the school over that time.
I have, Caroline. It's the biggest change was moving out of Winchester City and coming into this town. Well, actually, it's a village, just sort of set between Salisbury and Winchester, and it's got the most beautiful high street, and we have lovely, unique shops. We don't have any chains. We've just got really, other than Roxton's, we have a Roxton's, but we have beautiful shops, all unique, all run by independents. And so that's been a big change to make to the sewing school in moving away from the city. The other thing that I've changed over time is the classes. I mean, classes evolve with your students, and you begin to work out what your clients want. And I'm very lucky. I've got a team of ladies that come in on a self-employed basis, and they teach various genres of craft, and I'm the dressmaker, so I tend to do the dressmaking. But yeah, changes develop and happen quite slowly in this sort of business, but they're all changes for the good. And I see changes happening further down the line according to what's needed and what's requested, really.
Lovely. So what is your average working day like at Bobbin Sewing School?
So at Bobbin Sewing School, my average day is probably getting up and checking emails, because when you work for yourself and you do practically everything for yourself, you have to be juggling all sorts of areas of the business. It isn't just getting up and teaching a class. It's actually getting up and checking if there are any messages, dealing with those, and then prepping for classes. It's interesting because I tend to have days where I put aside time for commission work and for alterations, and then I have set days for classes, but they tend to blend in with one another at times too. So it's a bit of a juggling act. But I would say, working for myself, you never quite switch off, and I know that you'll know that, Caroline. You never
Stop.
No,
Never.
you don't. I mean, you try to have days off, but in those days off, those thoughts of your business creep in.
Yeah, and you're always answering the emails.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I even if I don't answer an email straight away because I'm having a strict day where I'm thinking, well, actually it's a Sunday, I shouldn't really answer this. I will have read it, and I will have clocked it, and I will have made a mental note that I will be answering it.
I guess that's one of the lows of running your own business.
It is.
Yeah. What about one of the highs?
Oh, the highs is the people. I think that's the thing. I think I love people, and I think that's my forte, is that I have I don't know how to say it, but I enjoy the company of people. Yeah. I enjoy sharing my business. I enjoy sharing my knowledge. Well, that's what I want to do.
Been a participant in your classes right at the very beginning, you have a warmth and you're passionate and you're knowledgeable and you're welcoming, and that's why people stay with you.
Thank you. Yes. And it's lovely. You make such good connections and friends
and friendships.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's great. It's a community, and I would say one of the things that I found through teaching and more recently is that when I was at home with my young children and I was working alone, it was quite a lonely existence. Sewing for one person, or it's quite lonely. You never integrate with other people. And all of a sudden, and especially since sort of like the make do and mend era, sort of going back into the early 2010s, sort of when we had the austerity times, as they called it, and we took on that make do and mend mentality. People wanted to learn how to do things, and all of a sudden social media as well. I'm not a great social media person. I'm not very good at posting. It's one of my very weak areas, but I think that social media has opened up a whole community, and we don't feel lonely anymore.
No, there's always someone there.
There's always somebody there doing something that you're interested in. It's given us a real sense of community.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So do you have any new plans for the future of Bobbin?
Well, yeah, I do. We've all had to adapt this last year, and when I look back at the year that's gone by, I had planned to get up a lot of online classes. I did make a start, and then unfortunately I got the dreaded virus, and so I ended up having to put plans on hold for a few months while I recovered from that. But I want to pursue classes in alterations. It's something that I have lots of experience with. So I need to get those into online classes. And the reason I want to do them as online classes is the fact that I don't feel I've ever happily made the best of the time for alterations in the sewing school physically. I want people to go away feeling fulfilled. And when people come to a class in a morning and they expect to go home with a whole pile of alterations done by lunchtime, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And yes, I could just bring them in and teach them basics, like just putting a dart in or turning up a pair of trousers. But often alterations are, they're skilled, and they take various...
They're complex.
They are complex. A lot of them are complex. So I feel that actually to put it into an online class is far more attainable to the student, where they can actually see what they're meant to do, go away and spend an hour or two unpicking, and not spend an hour or two unpicking in a class where they feel it's wasted time. Well, actually, where I feel it's wasted time, and I want my students to get best value for money. So for me, I have run alterations classes in the past. I've come away feeling very despondent about it. I'm not sure whether the students have gone away feeling despondent, but I felt that I haven't given the best value for that. So that's something that I'm going to pursue. I am intending to do that. I'm going to drop off some other work to make that happen. So keep your eyes peeled.
I know how much hard work and dedication it takes to run in a small business. If someone was thinking of starting out in any small business, what advice would you give them?
Oh, do you know what? I'd say timetable, definite time off for yourself.
We're not good at that, are we, Ali?
No. I would say, I know it's really hard, but you need to do a little bit of self-care. Otherwise, you end up making yourself feel quite wound up or ill or stressed, and that's not good. So I think self-care, yes, your business is going to be your baby, and it'll be your baby for as long as you've got it, I think, because it's important. It's, it's an income, it's a source of pleasure, it's a source of stress. So I think self-care, time off, and timetable your time off, so that you've got a moment where you are going to switch off the emails, you're going to switch off the lights and the plugs, and you're just going to look after yourself. So whether you take yourself out for a walk, or whether you take yourself off to a spa if that's your thing, or if a short weekend break. But I think definitely timetable, time off. Yes, just to keep your brain from going into overload when you're starting out.
I get that.
Especially when you're starting.
Yeah.
And I'm always telling you, aren't I? I'm always saying, Caroline.
I know. I know we've just touched on it, but when we taught together, we often commented on the lovely bonds and friendships our students made, especially when we ran the sewing, well, we still run the sewing retreats. But I think it goes both ways, and we gain a lot from the friendships we form, whether it's through other sewing colleagues or those that we teach. And as you know, Ali, this takes place over a lot of tea and cake.
It does.
It's one of the most important parts, I think, to our classes. So tell me, what is your favourite cake to make and serve?
Well,
Random.
because I'm here on my own, I tend to do biscuits, but occasionally I will grab the cake out, or I'll have made a cake. And actually, I've got no excuse not to make cakes because I have lots of eggs.
I was going to say, Ali, we've got eggs coming out of our ears.
So I have to say, I am a fan of a Victoria sandwich to serve, because I think it's just a classic. It's a classic cake. It's just one everybody likes. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everybody.
No, they do like. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you kind of you get to know people's tastes. I think, especially when they come back. If you're doing a 6-week run of a class, and I'm always really conscious when I do 6-week classes or 3-week classes, which are quite rare for the two of us. We tend to do one-off classes. That I don't want to repeat the cake.
I know.
And so you having to remember what you made the week before.
I know.
I have to say, Ali, one of the favourite cakes you brought to one of our classes was it was like a sponge loaf, but it has raspberries in it.
Oh yes.
Can you remember?
Yes.
And that was, and in fact, I think your son made it. I think Ollie made it.
He possibly did. He's pretty good at the
and that was a real hit. And it's come from the allotment and from your own eggs. And I think people just love the fact that he'd gone to the effort of making it, but all the produce was basically yours.
I agree. I think that's the thing. I think that you know, it's a real treat to have a proper homemade cake, and I'm very lucky. I come from a line of bakers. So my grandfather was a master baker, and my mother is a fantastic cook. She really is. And I'm lucky that I have that sort of like that skill, that just it doesn't feel difficult to me. It's one of those easy things to do. And also having a family, having 2 sons and a husband, they eat, well, they used to, they don't so much now, they're a little bit more grown up, but when they were real teenagers, I couldn't keep on top of it. It was cake after cake after cake, you know, it was just keep them filled up. It's not the healthiest of ways of filling them up, but it's it's just one of the ways
I know running a business is full on and it's pretty exhausting. So apart from baking, what else do you like to do to relax?
Okay, so I do like to walk. I like walking. I love the countryside. I love getting involved with the animals. As in the first introduction, I said we've got sheep and I love my sheep. So that's a nice relaxation. That's a nice switch off to just go and see them and just have a little chat over the gate while actually in the field with them.
Exactly.
But I love growing things. I love gardening.
I know you've got a new greenhouse. What's in there?
A new greenhouse. Well, actually, to be quite honest, I haven't planted anything in my new greenhouse yet because it's meant to be my greenhouse, but it's being taken over by somebody else. So he's been planting things, but I'm going to definitely be planting some things this coming week. The weather's changing and it's never lucky. So it's a new hobby, not a new hobby, it's a new venture to have a greenhouse, which is exciting.
That's lovely. I'm so pleased for you. Well, thank you, Ali, for letting us interview you today.
Thank you.
Yes, so who will be our next Sew Ab Fab podcast guest?
Good question. So we will be interviewing a lovely lady, Nicola Frost, who has been running her business Sew Busy for the past 8 years. And she's going to tell us about how her situation and the birth of Sew Busy led her to an invitation to the Queen's Garden Party.
Oh, I think that's going to be a lovely journey for us to listen to. If you enjoyed our podcast and would like to hear more, please do subscribe. Keep in touch and follow us on our social media feeds and websites. In the meantime, Happy sewing, everybody.
Happy
Happy
sewing.
sewing. Bye.